Stand the Storm by Breena Clarke. Gabriel yearned for a cup of drink, but the fire in the hearth was too low to boil water. During the time of his apprenticeship, his most important evening duty had been to keep water at boil for Abraham Pearl. The man was fond of a hot drink at night. Gabriel Coates's solemnity was exacerbated by the darkness of the room on this night. He had lit a single taper and had this near his elbow. It brightened only the page he wrote on and a small circle outward from his hand. The rest of the room disappeared into a netherworld beyond the candle flame. Gabriel was superstitious that full illumination would give the pernicious official paper the more power. He removed it from his breast pocket and pushed it nearly to the edge of the table, far away from the light. His own writing seemed weak, powerless beside it. It was a commanding document. It was a document for taking away from himself and his women, his family, their souls, their lives and freedom, their dignity. They had had none. He had purchased it, or a semblance of it, and now this document would take it back. Gabriel's stomach burned to think that his former master, Jonathan Ridley, believed he could perpetrate this fraud. Did he mean to take the government's reimbursement money for freeing slaves he had already manumitted by written agreement? Tales of fraud in connection with the new decree were circulating the town. Others had enriched themselves by this method. Folk who were long ago legally freed through purchase were being called up and claimed by their former masters. It was a circle of viciousness. Gabriel exhausted a portion of his anger in writing a letter to Reverend Higgins. He had some influence in the town that he exercised on behalf of colored. He was the only white man liable to help them. The agitation threatened to unhinge Gabriel as he tried to keep the situation from the others. Of course, this evil news would soon be known, as any vinegar that is spilled from an overturned jar is known for what it is. It pained Gabriel to imagine how the others would receive the news. And the children, what of them? They were compelled to report for examination? Compelled! If they did not submit themselves, the authorities had leave to come and bring them. From this, Gabriel worriedly sought to protect them. Just that. He had pledged to Mary that being free, they both would bring free children and keep them free through earnest toil. And now this had come. His chickens were to be taken up. If not lost or damaged, then handled and bandied about, and it hurt him to consider it. He imagined the look in their mother's eyes, a look that would strike him mortally if it were a bullet. What would Mary think? Gabriel had seen the expression of deep devotion and possession on his wife's face. This feeling that gives way to fear when the child gains her feet and begins walking away from the nurturing arms. Often he'd seen it in Mary and had felt the same and wondered whether it was so clearly read in his face. Jonathan Ridley would steal the profit of these children when they had never been his bondpersons. They were capriciously in his thrall. No law or edict or promise came out to benefit the colored man. Disquietude was the enemy of Gabriel Coates's stomach. He went to the yard and heaved his misery onto the ground yet again. It had been decreed that slaves residing within the boundaries of the District of Columbia were free. But this was a stingy and ugly decree, for as a consequence, a slave owner was eligible to receive monetary compensation. Eager to beat the 6-month deadline for filing a claim, Jonathan Ridley had hired a representative to secure his compensation. The lie. There it is. Jonathan Ridley is not entitled to this compensation because these people mentioned are free people. These are the people whose freedom had been purchased by Gabriel Coates and his mother. They had worked to pay Jonathan Ridley. These daughters, my daughters, are free girls from a free purchased woman, my wife. Gabriel slammed his fist on the top of his mother's laundry barrel. It thudded like a sour drum. Mary's freedom was secured after purchase at an auction. He has no right to claim that she or her daughters are his bond people. They are free-born children, he exploded. Still, they were mentioned and would be considered and valued for his money. The freedom meant nothing then, for the white masters would make the freedom into slavery, just as sweet milk would turn to clabber in the sun. Ah, sweet milk, sweet girls. Would they turn their innocent eyes on their father as they were led away? Would he stand impotent to help them? What would become of the father protector who could not save a daughter from this humiliation? If he rushed against the man who put a hand on them, would he not risk his own death? And if he resisted physically and put down his life, could he rise from the dead to care for these daughters? Could he then coddle them and train them and give them over to some good and strong husband? Would they not fall into poverty and a life of drudgery without their father? He could not relinquish his daughter's freedom to support the lie. He would resist this on their behalf and for the other women. If this lie lived and flourished, then all along the freedom had meant nothing. Ridley could have come at any time and told these lies and taken them away. This was a cold thought that Gabriel had not entertained until now. Had Mary considered this possibility? Oh, what would become of this woman who had placed so much assurance upon the fact that these girls belonged to none but their parents? Gabriel knew that Mary waited for him upstairs. His brusqueness would put off her questions. He needed to mull before he could explain this tangle to her. He wanted her comfort, though. He wanted her to ply his face with kisses, but not know what wounds her kisses salved. He would not tell her yet. Annie returned to her bed and was comforted by the familiar. As always, the familiar. The same old things. She pulled a quilt to her chin. She lay beneath it and considered her children. Listening to Gabriel and Mary rustling about in their bed, she finally rested.